Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, Empire of Cards. Dominic Russo stared at the skyline from his office window. The city sprawled before him like a kingdom he'd built brick by brick. At 42, he transformed from a scrappy kid from South Boston into one of the most respected property developers on the East Coast. His reflection in the glass told the story. Tailored suit hiding the scars of his past. Cold blue eyes concealing calculations always running beneath the surface. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Russo, your wife is on line one." Dominic's jaw tightened. 6 years of marriage to Vanessa Montgomery Russo. And lately, every conversation felt like navigating a minefield. "Put her through," he said, his Boston accent barely perceptible after years of consciously suppressing it. "Dominic," her voice carried that familiar edge. "The Prescotts canceled dinner again. I told you involving your brother-in-law in the Harbor Point deal would complicate things." "The Prescotts will come around," Dominic replied, and involving Raymond was necessary. The Montgomery family name opened doors mine couldn't. "Just remember whose idea it was to bring you into the fold," Vanessa said. "Daddy wasn't convinced a Russo belonged at our table, let alone in our boardroom." The reminder stung more than Dominic would admit. Howard Montgomery had made it abundantly clear that the son of a janitor wasn't good enough for his daughter, despite Dominic's success. Only Dominic's brilliant property development strategy for the waterfront had changed the old man's mind. "I'll be late tonight," Vanessa continued. "Foundation meeting. Don't wait up." The call ended before he could respond. Dominic pulled up his calendar. The Montgomery Family Foundation had no meeting scheduled. It was the third meeting this month. His office door opened without a knock. Only one person had that privilege. "Your brother-in-law's here," said Anthony Kowalski, Dominic's head of security and oldest friend. Their history stretched back to St. Mary's Home for Boys, where they'd formed an unbreakable bond amid neglect and violence. Anthony's eyes conveyed what his words didn't. "Be careful." Raymond Montgomery strode in as if he owned the place, which technically he partly did. As Vanessa's younger brother and Dominic's business partner in Russo Montgomery Developments, Raymond had the Montgomery family's classic good looks. Wavy chestnut hair, green eyes, and an easy smile that charmed investors and building inspectors alike. Dumb. Just the man I wanted to see. Raymond dropped a folder on Dominic's desk. "The North Shore projections. We need to revise our strategy." Dominic opened the folder, scanning the contents with practiced efficiency. "These numbers don't match what Nelson presented last week." "Nelson's conservative. Always has been." Raymond loosened his tie. "I had Beck run new projections. Without consulting me." Dominic kept his voice level, but his hand tightened on the paper. Beck was Raymond's recent hire, young, ambitious, and too eager to please the Montgomery side of the business. "Just exploring options, partner." Raymond's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Speaking of options, Vanessa mentioned you're having doubts about the Harbor Point expansion." Dominic hadn't shared those thoughts with Vanessa. The realization slid like ice down his spine. "We're overextended," Dominic said carefully. "Taking on Harbor Point Phase 2 now increases our exposure if the market shifts. That's why I brought in the Taiwanese investors." Raymond leaned forward. "They're ready to commit, but they want assurances we're all in." Hesitation sends the wrong message. "I don't recall approving Taiwanese investors." Raymond's smile tightened. "Board approved it last month while you were in Chicago." Another decision made without him. The pattern was becoming clear, but Dominic needed more evidence before making his move. "I'll review the materials," Dominic said. "We'll discuss tomorrow." After Raymond left, Dominic pulled out his phone and texted a number saved under tax consultant. "Need your expertise. Dinner at Marcel's, 8 p.m. The reply came immediately. "I'll bring my calculator." Marcel's was the kind of place where privacy came with the exorbitant prices. Dominic sat in a corner booth when Natalia Vega slid in across from him. At 35, Natalia had left her FBI cybercrime unit to start her own security firm. Now she was the person Boston's elite called when they needed information no one was supposed to find. You look terrible, she said, studying his face. Charming as always, Nat. What's the job, Dom? Your text sounded urgent. Dominic slid a USB drive across the table. Need you to monitor some communications. Discreetly. Whose? My wife's. And my brother-in-law's. Natalia raised an eyebrow, but took the drive. You think they're screwing you in business? Or, that's what I need to find out. Dom, are you sure? Just find what's there, Nat. If it's nothing, I'll sleep better. And if it's something, Dominic's eyes hardened. Then they'll wish it was nothing. 3 days later, Dominic found what he needed. Natalia hadn't found explicit messages between Vanessa and Raymond, but their patterns were suspicious. Deleted text chains, late-night calls, locations that matched when both claimed to be elsewhere. More concerning were Raymond's communications with the board and investors, systematically undermining Dominic's position. On his drive home, Dominic's phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. Need to talk. Important. Home early. Their Beacon Hill home was lit up when Dominic arrived. Inside, he found Vanessa in the living room with Raymond. The tension in the air was palpable. What's this about? Dominic asked, setting down his briefcase. Your business plan for Harbor Point, Raymond said, waving a document Dominic recognized as his confidential contingency strategy. Care to explain why you're developing a scale-down option behind our backs? Behind your backs? That's my risk assessment. Standard practice. Dominic's mind raced. That document had been his private safe. The question is, how did you get it? That doesn't matter, Vanessa cut in. What matters is you're undermining the company. The board is concerned. The board? Or just the Montgomery contingent? Dominic's voice remained calm, though fury burned beneath. Interesting timing, considering the mysterious Taiwanese investors who appeared while I was in Chicago. This isn't about them, Raymond snapped. It's about trust. Trust. Dominic laughed, a cold sound. Let's talk about trust, Raymond. Let's talk about the meetings you've had with Vanessa that neither of you mentioned, or the board votes you've orchestrated without my knowledge. Vanessa paled slightly. You've been spying on us? Protecting my interests. Dominic turned to her. Including those foundation meetings that never appeared on any calendar. You don't understand, Vanessa began. I understand perfectly. Dominic cut her off. You two have been systematically trying to push me out. The question is why now? What's the urgency? Raymond's face darkened. You're a disgrace to this family name, he roared, grabbing Dominic's business plan and tearing it to shreds. You're out of the partnership, effective now. Vanessa stepped closer, her voice cold. And this house is mine. The lawyers are on their way. They gave me 15 minutes, Dominic said quietly. He climbed the stairs to his office, hearing their hushed, urgent conversation below. In his office, Dominic opened his safe, removed a small device, and activated it. Then he took only what he needed, a specific thumb drive, passport, and a burner phone. The rest could be replaced. As he stepped onto the porch, he heard it. Raymond and Vanessa's phones erupting with notifications. Dozens, then hundreds of frantic alerts, messages and calls flooding in simultaneously because his contingency plan had just gone into effect. He smiled for the first time that day. Chapter 2. Blood and Mortar. Dominic Russo learned about power at age 11 when 3 older boys cornered him behind St. Mary's Home for Boys. They took his shoes, donated Nikes, the first new things he'd ever owned. That night, he waited until they slept, took back his shoes, and cut the laces into pieces. You didn't get revenge, young Anthony Kowalski had observed. They'll just beat you worse. I didn't want revenge, Dominic had replied. I wanted them to know I'm not afraid. 29 years later, Dominic sat in Anthony's spare bedroom, that same principle guiding his actions. He wasn't afraid of the Montgomerys. He was preparing to destroy them. They're panicking, Anthony said, showing Dominic his laptop screen. Whatever you did, it worked. On the screen, financial news headlines scrolled. Russo Montgomery stock plummets. Harbor Point development in jeopardy. Montgomery family wealth takes hit amid investor concerns. I didn't touch our stock, Dominic said. I simply released information about Raymond's secret meetings with the Taiwanese investors to our American backers, and sent documentation of board irregularities to key shareholders. The timing was perfect, Anthony mused. Right before the Asian markets opened. Raymond's been siphoning resources to a shadow project for months. I found the trail, but couldn't determine the endgame. Now they've forced my hand. Anthony studied his oldest friend. This isn't just about business, is it? Dominic's expression darkened. Vanessa has been transferring funds to an offshore account. Small amounts, building over time. She was planning to leave you anyway, with a substantial portion of what I built. Dominic's voice hardened. What we built, and don't forget your stake in this. Anthony nodded. He'd been with Dominic from the beginning, from their days at St. Mary's to their first construction jobs, through night school and Dominic's meteoric rise. Anthony's security company now protected all Russo Montgomery properties, and his financial future was tied to Dominic's. What's our next move? Anthony asked. We need leverage. Dominic pulled out his burner phone. It's time to call in some family connections. Franco Russo hadn't spoken to his son in 15 years. Not since Dominic had walked away from the family business, a euphemism for the organized crime operation Franco ran from his auto shop in South Boston. When his secretary said Dominic Russo was on the line, Franco nearly dropped his cigar. Dominic, Franco said, his gravelly voice betraying emotion he'd never admit to. Must be the end of the world if you're calling me. I need information, Pop, Dominic replied without preamble, about Howard Montgomery's real estate dealings in the 90s. The Montgomery heir? Franco chuckled. Why am I not surprised you married into that family? Always reaching for what wasn't meant for boys like us. Can you help or not? Meet me at O'Malley's. Tonight, 10 p.m. Come alone. O'Malley's hadn't changed in 2 decades. Same sticky floors, same smell of stale beer and broken dreams. Franco Russo sat in the back booth, looking older but no less dangerous at 73. You look like your mother, Franco said as Dominic sat down. Let's skip the family reunion, Dominic replied. Montgomery. Franco pushed an envelope across the table. Howard Montgomery built his fortune on some questionable land deals. The kind where buildings mysteriously caught fire and properties suddenly became available. You saying he committed arson? I'm saying he knew people who knew people. Franco tapped the envelope, including one Bobby Finnegan, who did 10 years for a warehouse fire that killed 2 homeless men. Coincidentally, Montgomery bought that property a month later. Finnegan's still alive, living in a nursing home in Quincy. Has early-stage dementia, but some days he's sharp. Loves to talk about the old days. Dominic pocketed the envelope. Thanks. One more thing, Franco said as Dominic stood to leave. Your brother-in-law, Raymond Montgomery? He's been making some interesting friends lately. The kind that don't appear in business registries. Criminal connections? Franco shrugged. Let's just say some people I know have been asked to help with a special project at Harbor Point. Off-the-books construction, very specific requirements. Dominic's mind raced with possibilities. What kind of requirements? The kind that need reinforced walls, soundproofing, and discrete access points. Franco gave his son a knowing look. Not typical luxury condo features. As Dominic turned to leave, Franco called after him. Whatever you're planning, remember, you've got more Russo in you than you think. The words followed Dominic into the night, both warning and reassurance. The next morning, Dominic visited Shady Pines nursing home. Bobby Finnegan was having a lucid day, his roomy eyes lighting up at the mention of Howard Montgomery. That fancy bastard, Finnegan wheezed. Promised me a pension for life. Know what I got? Enough for 10 years inside, then this place. Tell me about the warehouse fire, Dominic prompted. Montgomery wanted that land bad. Said he'd pay triple my usual fee. Finnegan leaned closer. Didn't tell me people were living there. That wasn't the deal. You have proof of Montgomery's involvement? Finnegan cackled. Course I do. Insurance. He tapped his temple, hidden where no one would look. My daughter has it. Insurance for my insurance, you might say. It took another hour and a promise of improved care for Finnegan to reveal his daughter's name. Maggie Finnegan, now Maggie Walsh, a nurse at Boston General. Maggie Walsh was suspicious when Dominic approached her, but the mention of her father and adequate financial incentive loosened her tongue. Dad gave me a safety deposit box key years ago, she explained in the hospital cafeteria. Said if anything happened to him, I should use what's inside to make the Montgomerys pay. What's in it? Letters. recordings, payment records. Maggie's eyes hardened. Howard Montgomery left my father to rot while he built an empire on those deaths. I want to make a deal, Dominic said. You give me access to that safety deposit box, and I'll make sure your father gets the best care available for the rest of his life. Why should I trust you? Because Howard Montgomery's son-in-law betrayed me, and his daughter, my wife, helped him do it. Dominic's voice carried the cold edge of certainty. And I'm going to make them pay. By evening, Dominic had photos of handwritten letters from Howard Montgomery to Bobby Finnegan, discussing payment for property acquisition services with specific references to the warehouse address. Most damning was a recorded conversation preserved on an old microcassette, where Montgomery could be heard instructing Finnegan to make sure it looks accidental and timing is crucial for the insurance. As Dominic reviewed the evidence in Anthony's apartment, his burner phone rang. Natalia. You need to see this, she said without greeting. I've been monitoring Raymond's communications as requested. He's meeting someone tonight at the Harbor Point construction site. Someone named Zhao. The Taiwanese investor, Dominic murmured. That's not all. I found blueprints on Raymond's private server. Modifications to the Harbor Point design that weren't in the official plans. Dominic, they're building some kind of secure facility within the development. The specifications match high-security holding areas. Send me everything you have. And Nat, I need surveillance on that meeting tonight. After ending the call, Dominic turned to Anthony. We need to move faster than planned. Raymond's up to something bigger than pushing me out. What are you thinking? I'm thinking it's time we turn the Montgomery family's methods against them. Dominic's expression was resolute, starting with a fire of our own. Chapter 3. Ashes to Assets. The Harbor Point construction site stood illuminated against the night sky, a skeleton of what would become Boston's premier waterfront development. Security was minimal. Anthony had made sure of that by scheduling a last-minute training session for the regular guards, replacing them with his less attentive employees. From his vantage point in a vacant building across the street, Dominic watched through binoculars as Raymond's Maserati pulled into the site. His brother-in-law emerged with another man, trim, middle-aged, with an expensive suit and the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. That's Zhao, Natalia confirmed beside him, adjusting her directional microphone. Wei Zhao, officially a representative of Taiwanese development firm Golden Century. Unofficially, he has close ties to certain government interests. Can you hear them? Give me a second. Natalia fine-tuned the equipment. Got it. Raymond's voice came through clearly. Assure you, Mr. Zhao, the facility will meet all specifications. Once operational, you'll have complete privacy. My employers are concerned about the recent financial turbulence, Zhao replied. Your partner's removal must be handled carefully. Dominic is out. The board meeting tomorrow will formalize it, and the evidence he may have gathered won't be a problem. We're handling it. Dominic's jaw tightened. The pieces were falling into place. Raymond wasn't just betraying him. He was using their legitimate business to create cover for something much darker. They're moving inside, Natalia noted as the men disappeared into the partially constructed main building. I've seen enough, Dominic said, packing up his equipment. It's time. At precisely 11:17 p.m., as Raymond and Zhao were examining the hidden facility plans inside the construction trailer, a series of small explosions erupted across the site. Not large enough to cause major structural damage, but perfectly placed to ignite the stockpiled materials, lumber, tarps, and barrels of chemical sealants. From his vantage point, Dominic watched the chaos unfold. Fires spread quickly, alarms blared, and emergency vehicles approached in the distance. Raymond and Zhao emerged from the trailer, panic evident in their hurried movements. Dramatic, Natalia commented dryly. Necessary, Dominic corrected. Now Raymond has a real crisis to manage, and his private meeting with Zhao will be documented by emergency responders. He checked his watch, which means it's time for Phase 2. The next morning's emergency board meeting of Russo Montgomery Developments took place in their downtown headquarters. Dominic arrived unannounced, causing visible shock among the board members who clearly hadn't expected him. Gentlemen, ladies, he greeted, taking his usual seat. I understand there's been a significant incident at Harbor Point. Raymond, disheveled and clearly sleep-deprived, stared in disbelief. What are you doing here? You're no longer part of this company. Actually, Dominic slid documents across the table. I very much am. My removal would require a formal board vote, which hasn't occurred. And given last night's incident, I think my presence is rather crucial. Howard Montgomery, Vanessa and Raymond's father and chairman emeritus, spoke up from the head of the table. Dominic, this is hardly the time. On the contrary, Howard, this is exactly the time. Dominic activated the presentation screen, displaying photographs of Raymond and Zhao at the construction site. I think the board should know about Mr. Montgomery's private arrangement with Wei Zhao, particularly the secure facility being built without board approval. Murmurs spread around the table as Dominic continued. More concerning is Mr. Zhao's actual background. The screen changed to show intelligence documents. He represents certain foreign interests seeking to establish what amounts to an unauthorized listening post disguised as a development project. That's ridiculous, Raymond sputtered. Zhao is a legitimate investor who arrived in Boston on a diplomatic passport and has met 3 times with known intelligence operatives, Dominic finished. Our company is being used as cover for an espionage operation, putting everyone in this room at risk of federal prosecution. The boardroom erupted in concerned voices. Howard Montgomery pounded the table for order. These are serious allegations, Dominic. Do you have proof? I've already provided it to the appropriate authorities, Dominic replied calmly. They're quite interested in last night's meeting, which occurred just before the fire. Raymond's face drained of color. You started the fire? I reported suspicious activity at a construction site where I'm still legally a partner, Dominic corrected. The investigation will determine the cause. Perhaps it was electrical, or maybe it was related to the unauthorized construction modifications you ordered. Howard Montgomery studied his son-in-law with new assessment. What do you want, Dominic? Simple. Raymond's immediate resignation and full control of Harbor Point transferred to me. In exchange, I'll handle the Zhao situation discreetly, sparing the company and the Montgomery family public embarrassment and potential criminal charges. This is blackmail, Raymond hissed. This is business, Dominic countered. And unlike you, I'm offering a path that protects the company we built. The board members exchanged nervous glances. Howard Montgomery finally nodded. We need to discuss this privately. Dominic, Raymond, wait outside. In the hallway, Raymond's composure cracked. You think you've won? Vanessa's already filing divorce papers that will take half of everything you own. Interesting timing, Dominic mused. Right when you needed me out of the way for your Harbor Point operation. Tell me, how long have you been planning this with my wife? Before Raymond could answer, their phones simultaneously exploded with notifications, dozens, then hundreds of alerts. Raymond fumbled with his device, face contorting in horror as he scrolled through emergency news alerts. What have you done? He stammered. Dominic checked his own phone with practice calm. The screen showed breaking news. Montgomery family scandal. Decades-old arson evidence emerges, alongside images of Howard Montgomery's incriminating letters to Bobby Finnegan. Insurance, Dominic said simply. I learned from the best. Raymond lunged forward, grabbing Dominic's lapels. You destroy my father, I'll destroy you. Security guards appeared immediately, Anthony among them. Problem here, Mr. Russo? He asked pointedly. No problem. Dominic straightened his jacket as Raymond was pulled away. Mr. Montgomery was just leaving permanently. The boardroom door opened. Howard Montgomery, standing ashen-faced in the doorway, phone in hand. His eyes met Dominic's with a mixture of hatred and reluctant respect. You've made your point, the older man said quietly. The board has voted to accept your terms. Dominic nodded once. Wise decision. I'll have my lawyers draw up the paperwork. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Howard? Tell Vanessa her belongings will be packed and waiting at her father's house. The prenup she insisted on has an infidelity clause that works both ways. My lawyers will be in touch about that as well. As he walked away, Dominic heard Raymond's desperate voice. Father, we can fight this. Shut up, Raymond, Howard snapped. You've done enough damage. Dominic smiled to himself. The Montgomerys had taught him an important lesson about family. Blood wasn't always thicker than water, but revenge was sweeter than both. Chapter 4. Scorched Earth. 3 weeks after the Harbor Point fire, Dominic sat in the newly appointed office of Russo Developments, watching skyline shadows lengthen across Boston Harbor. The company name had changed, board members had been replaced, and the Montgomery influence had been surgically excised from his business affairs. Howard Montgomery's reputation lay in tatters, the decades-old arson evidence triggering investigations into multiple development projects. While the old man's army of lawyers would likely spare him prison, his legacy was permanently tarnished. Raymond had fled to an undisclosed location, presumably to escape both legal scrutiny and the wrath of his mysterious foreign partners. Initial FBI inquiries into the Harbor Point project had vindicated Dominic's claims about unauthorized construction and security concerns. And Vanessa, she'd gone uncharacteristically quiet after her initial flurry of legal threats. Their divorce proceedings had begun, but her expected aggressive stance had softened to cautious negotiation. It felt like victory, yet Dominic knew better. This was merely the opening gambit. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Natalia entered without waiting for permission, dropping a file on his desk. "You need to see this," she said. Vanessa accessed a safe deposit box yesterday at First Maritime Bank. Not one we knew about. Dominic opened the file, finding surveillance photos of his soon-to-be ex-wife entering the bank, looking nervously over her shoulder. "What was in the box?" "Unknown," Natalia replied. But afterward, she met with this man. She pointed to another photo showing Vanessa in conversation with a middle-aged man in an expensive suit. Wesley Palmer, former prosecutor, now a high-priced defense attorney specializing in white-collar crime. "She's preparing countermeasures," Dominic mused. "The question is, what leverage does she think she has?" "There's more," Natalia continued. "Raymond surfaced briefly in New York 2 days ago. He met with this woman." Another photo showed Raymond with an elegant Asian woman outside a Manhattan restaurant. Lin Mei-ling, Taiwanese diplomatic corps, officially. Unofficially. Connected to Zhao, Dominic finished. "They're regrouping. Should I dig deeper on Mei-ling?" "Yes, but carefully. This has escalated beyond family betrayal." Dominic steepled his fingers. "They hit me first, but they don't understand what they've started." That evening, Dominic visited a place he'd avoided for over 15 years, his father's auto shop in South Boston. Franco Russo was working alone, hands black with grease despite his age, a cigarette dangling from his lips. "Twice in a month," Franco remarked without looking up. "The world really must be ending." "I need a more detailed picture of Raymond's connections," Dominic said. "Specifically about Zhao and a woman named Mei-ling." Franco wiped his hands on a rag. "You stirred up something nasty with that Harbor Point fire. People are nervous. The kind of people who don't get nervous easily." "What have you heard?" "That your brother-in-law promised delivery of something valuable. Something that wasn't his to give." Franco fixed his son with a knowing look. "Something that might be yours." Dominic's mind raced through possibilities. The only unique asset in that development was the location, direct harbor access, minimal oversight. And who controls the harbor security contracts in that sector? Understanding dawned. Kowalski's Security. Anthony's company. Exactly. Franco crushed his cigarette under his boot. "Your friend's business gave you eyes on all harbor traffic. Perfect for someone monitoring certain shipments. Someone like federal authorities, who I hear have been particularly interested in your friend's security feeds lately." The implications were staggering. For years, Dominic had allowed Anthony to use their property's strategic locations to assist occasional federal investigations, an arrangement that kept both businesses clean and provided useful connections. Raymond must have discovered this partnership and offered to neutralize it. "Raymond was selling access," Dominic said slowly, "promising to remove me and gain control of the security infrastructure. And now his foreign friends are unhappy about their investment," Franco confirmed. "Unhappy enough to start looking for alternatives, including your ex-wife, who's been making some interesting calls to former associates of mine." Vanessa is connecting with criminals? She's exploring options, Franco corrected. People who specialize in permanent solutions to complicated problems. Dominic absorbed this with cold calculation. Thanks for the warning. It's not a warning, it's a suggestion. Franco's eyes, so similar to Dominic's own, hardened. Finish this before it finishes you. The following morning, Dominic received an unexpected visitor at his penthouse apartment. Detective Lisa Martinez from Boston PD's Financial Crimes Unit. Mr. Russo, she began after declining coffee, I'm investigating some irregularities surrounding Russo Montgomery developments, specifically regarding the Harbor Point project. Former Russo Montgomery, Dominic corrected smoothly. Now simply Russo Developments. And all my financial records are available to the proper authorities with appropriate warrants. Actually, I'm here about your ex-partner, Raymond Montgomery. He's made some serious allegations about financial manipulation and evidence tampering. Dominic's expression revealed nothing. Raymond is facing his own legal problems. Deflection is a common tactic. Perhaps. Martinez studied him carefully. But his sister, your wife, has provided some concerning documentation. Bank transfers, deleted communications supposedly recovered, meetings with known criminal elements. Detective, my divorce proceedings are ongoing. Vanessa has financial motivation to paint me in a negative light. That's what I figured, Martinez nodded. Which is why I wanted to hear your side before proceeding further. Something in her tone caught Dominic's attention. She wasn't hostile. If anything, she seemed to be offering an opening. Detective, off the record, what's really going on here? Martinez glanced at her partner, who stepped outside the apartment. Officially, I'm investigating potential financial crimes. Unofficially, there are some inconsistencies in the Montgomery sibling stories that concern me. Such as Raymond claiming to be blindsided by your accusations, when his calendar shows meetings with Wei Zhao dating back 6 months. Or Vanessa claiming financial ignorance while maintaining offshore accounts you apparently knew nothing about. Dominic considered his options carefully. Why tell me this? Because I investigated Howard Montgomery years ago when I was a rookie, the warehouse fire case. I knew Bobby Finnegan was covering for someone, but couldn't prove it. Martinez's eyes flashed with old determination. I don't like unfinished business. What do you need from me? Transparency, and a better understanding of what Raymond was really doing at Harbor Point. Dominic made his decision. I think it's time you met a friend of mine. Anthony Kowalski has some security footage you might find interesting. By nightfall, the chess pieces had moved significantly. Detective Martinez received access to Anthony's harbor security feeds, revealing numerous unauthorized meetings between Raymond, Zhao, and various unidentified figures of the Harbor Point site. More damning were recorded conversations Anthony had coincidentally captured, discussing shipment arrangements and customs blind spots. Meanwhile, Dominic had Natalia implementing a specialized cybersecurity protocol across all his business interests, one designed to track access attempts. Within hours, it detected sophisticated intrusion efforts originating from addresses linked to both Raymond's New York hotel and, surprisingly, Howard Montgomery's home network. They're looking for something specific, Natalia reported, targeting your personal financial records and communications with federal authorities. Let them find what we want them to find, Dominic instructed. The modified security logs showing Anthony's harbor monitoring system was a private initiative, not a government partnership. And if they dig deeper, they won't have time, Dominic replied. Because tomorrow, we escalate. That night, as Dominic reviewed his strategy, his secure phone rang, Anthony with urgent news. We've got trouble, his old friend said without preamble. Vanessa was spotted meeting with Marco Benetti. Dominic froze. Benetti was a name from his father's world, a professional who solved permanent problems for significant sums. When, 20 minutes ago, one of Franco's guys recognized her. Dom, she paid him. A lot from the looks of it. Understood. Implement Protocol Black. No one in or out of any property without triple verification. After ending the call, Dominic opened his safe and removed the gun he'd hoped never to use again, a reminder of the life he'd left behind. The weight of it felt familiar in his hand, despite the years. His phone chimed with a text from an unknown number, Harbor Warehouse. Midnight. Come alone if you want to end this cleanly. Dominic smiled grimly. They were making their move, which meant it was time for his counterattack. He texted Anthony, accelerate the timetable. Executed, Dawn. The real war was about to begin. Chapter 5, Blood Ties. The Harbor Warehouse loomed dark and silent, a relic from Boston's industrial past, now scheduled for demolition as part of Dominic's redevelopment plan. Its cavernous interior created ghostly echoes as he moved cautiously through the shadows, gun held low at his side. He wasn't alone, of course. Despite the message's instruction, Dominic had positioned Anthony and two trusted men at strategic points outside. Detective Martinez, now convinced of the Montgomery's criminal connections, had agreed to stay on standby with a tactical team, needing only Dominic's signal to move in. I know you're not alone, called a familiar voice, echoing through the empty space. You never did follow directions well. Vanessa stepped into the dim light, filtering through broken windows. She wore black, her normally perfect hair pulled back severely, making her look harder than Dominic remembered. Bringing an assassin to a meeting seems hypocritical, Dominic replied, scanning the darkness. Where's Benetti? Insurance, nothing more. He's not here. Vanessa moved closer, stopping 15 feet away. This doesn't have to end badly, Dominic. It already has. You chose your side, and you chose yours long ago. Something in her voice had changed, a bitterness that hadn't been there before. The mighty Dominic Russo, so focused on building his empire, he never noticed what was happening in his own home. Enlighten me. Did you ever wonder why my father finally accepted you? Why the great Howard Montgomery allowed his daughter to marry a janitor's son? Her laugh was brittle. Because you were useful. Your development strategy for the waterfront solved a problem that had been plaguing him for years. How to build legitimate businesses on properties with questionable acquisitions. I knew your father had skeletons, Dominic said evenly. Just like I knew you married me partly for my business acumen. Old news, Vanessa. Not quite. Vanessa's expression tightened. What you don't know is that Raymond and I had our own arrangement from the beginning. The Montgomery siblings protecting family interests against the outsider. By sleeping with your brother's contractors behind my back? Interesting protection strategy. Vanessa's composure slipped momentarily. You knew. I suspected. Natalia confirmed it last week. Phone records, hotel charges, the usual trail. Amateur work, really. That bitch, Vanessa hissed. Raymond said she could be bought. Raymond overestimated his persuasiveness. Dominic kept his voice controlled. What I don't understand is why now. Why push me out at this particular moment? Because Harbor Point was the final piece, came a new voice from the shadows. Raymond stepped forward, looking haggard but determined. With Harbor Point operational, we could finally step out from under our father's shadow, build our own empire without his constant oversight. Using foreign money and connections, Dominic noted, creating what amounts to an intelligence outpost disguised as luxury condos. Did Howard know? Father has become risk-averse in his old age, Raymond replied. Sometimes progress requires bold action. Bold action? You committed treason for profit. We created opportunity. Raymond's controlled facade cracked. While you were obsessing over perfect development plans and community impact studies, real money was on the table. Zhao and his associates needed a foothold, and we needed capital free from oversight. Dominic laughed coldly. And how's that working out? Your foreign friends aren't known for forgiveness when deals collapse. Which is why we're here, Vanessa interjected, to offer a way forward. For all of us. I'm listening. You transfer controlling interest in Harbor Point back to us, with guarantees of no further interference. In exchange, we ensure your other business interests remain untouched and certain evidence against you disappears. What evidence? Vanessa removed a flash drive from her pocket. Recordings of you discussing harbor security arrangements with federal authorities. Proof you've been acting as an informant. The kind of evidence that would make you a target for multiple interested parties. Interesting proposal, Dominic said, appearing to consider it. Just one problem. You're negotiating from a position of weakness. Raymond scoffed. You're outnumbered and cornered. Am I? Dominic smiled thinly. Anthony lights. Suddenly, the warehouse blazed with light as hidden industrial lamps activated. Raymond and Vanessa squinted against the brightness, momentarily disoriented, long enough for them to register the red laser dots that appeared on their chests. Detective Martinez and her tactical team have had an interesting evening listening to this conversation, Dominic informed them, particularly the parts about foreign intelligence operations and treason. Vanessa's face drained of color. You're bluffing. Martinez, your thoughts? Dominic called out. The detective's voice came through a loudspeaker. Mr. Montgomery, Mrs. Russo, please place your hands behind your heads. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit espionage, among other charges we'll discuss at the station. As tactical officers swarmed in, Dominic watched dispassionately while his wife and brother-in-law were handcuffed. Raymond struggled briefly before being subdued, while Vanessa maintained her composure, eyes locked on Dominic with pure hatred. This isn't over, she promised as they led her away. Actually, it is, Dominic replied, but not in the way you think. Dawn broke over Boston Harbor as Dominic watched the coordinated raids from Anthony's Security Command Center. Federal agents simultaneously descended on Howard Montgomery's mansion, Raymond's Manhattan hotel room, and 3 separate locations associated with Wei Zhao and his associates. Martinez kept her word, Anthony observed. Full tactical response. She's been waiting years to bring down Howard Montgomery, Dominic replied. We just provided the opportunity. On multiple screens, they watched the operations unfold. Howard Montgomery being escorted from his home in handcuffs. Raymond, already in custody, being transferred to federal agents. Zhao's associate Mei Ling detained at Logan Airport attempting to board a flight to Taipei. One screen showed Vanessa in an interrogation room, her lawyer Wesley Palmer beside her, both looking increasingly concerned as Martinez presented evidence. What happens now? Anthony asked. Now we rebuild, Dominic said. Harbor Point continues under our complete control, properly designed and built. The federal authorities get their espionage case. Martinez gets her revenge on Howard Montgomery, and we get our company back, stronger and uncompromised. And the Montgomerys? Dominic's expression hardened. They gambled and lost. Howard will likely negotiate a deal to avoid prison at his age, but his reputation and fortune are destroyed. Raymond faces serious federal charges with evidence too substantial to overcome. And Vanessa, he paused, a flicker of emotion crossing his face before disappearing. Vanessa made her choice. Anthony studied his oldest friend closely. You loved her once. I loved who I thought she was, Dominic corrected. But that person never existed. His phone buzzed with a message from Natalia. Final phase complete. All accounts secured. Assets frozen as requested. With a satisfied nod, Dominic sent a single-word reply. Proceed. The Montgomery dynasty had ruled Boston's elite circles for generations. By sunset, it would exist only in memory. Chapter 6. House of Cards. Howard Montgomery's voice rasped with fury, echoing through the Federal Detention Center's visitation room. You betrayed your family. Across the table, Vanessa maintained her composure despite 3 days in custody. I did what was necessary to salvage what we could. By turning state's evidence against your own brother? Howard's hand trembled as he pointed an accusatory finger. Raymond faces 20 years because of your testimony. Raymond faces 20 years because he conspired with foreign agents, Vanessa corrected coldly. I simply leveraged his mistakes to secure my own future. Exactly as you taught us. Howard's face flushed darker. I taught you family loyalty above all else. And where did that loyalty get us? Raymond in maximum security, you under house arrest, our assets frozen, and the Montgomery name dragged through the mud. Vanessa leaned forward. Dominic outplayed us, father. The only rational response is to salvage what we can. By helping them destroy your brother? By ensuring one member of this family emerges intact. Vanessa's eyes hardened. My immunity deal protects the offshore accounts you established in my name. Accounts Dominic never discovered. Once the dust settles, we'll have resources to rebuild. Howard studied his daughter with new assessment, a hint of reluctant pride mingling with his anger. "You become more calculating than I expected. I learned from the best." Vanessa glanced at the clock. "My lawyer has arranged a meeting with the prosecutors to finalize my statement. I need your authorization to access the contingency files. The Cayman documentation? Those are for true emergencies. What do you call this?" Vanessa gestured to their surroundings. "With those papers, I can secure at least $30 million beyond the government's reach. Without them, we lose everything." After a long moment, Howard nodded resignedly. "The authorization code is in the family Bible, Book of Revelations, naturally, the numbers corresponding to the marked verses." "Thank you, Father." Vanessa stood to leave. "I'll make sure your sacrifice means something." As she left, Howard called after her. "What about Dominic? What does your deal mean for him?" Vanessa paused at the door, her expression unreadable. "Dominic believes he's won. Let him enjoy it while he can." Across town, Dominic sat in the offices of Baldwin and Chun, one of Boston's most prestigious law firms. Eleanor Chun, managing partner and longtime legal advisor to Russo Developments, reviewed the documents before her with practiced efficiency. "The government seizure of Montgomery assets works in our favor," she noted. "With Howard's properties frozen pending investigation, your claim on the Harbor Point project stands unchallenged." "And the divorce proceedings?" Dominic asked. Given Vanessa's current legal situation and the evidence of infidelity, the prenuptial agreement will be enforced in full. She'll receive the minimum statutory amount, nothing more. Eleanor removed her glasses. "Though I understand she's negotiating an immunity deal. Let her. Everything she knows is already in the open." Eleanor studied her client carefully. "Dominic, while I admire your strategic brilliance, I feel obligated to ask, are you certain you want to proceed with the final phase? The Montgomerys are effectively destroyed. Some might consider this excessive." "The Montgomerys try to take everything from me," Dominic replied evenly. "Not just my business, but my reputation, my freedom, possibly even my life. They made this personal. I'm simply returning the favor." "Understood." Eleanor replaced her glasses. "The trust documents are prepared as requested. Once executed, the charitable foundation will control the majority of former Montgomery properties, with you as the controlling trustee. Legally unassailable, though certain to be challenged. Let them challenge. Every court case will simply air more Montgomery dirty laundry." Dominic signed the documents with a firm hand. "When does this become public?" "The press release goes out tomorrow. I imagine Howard Montgomery will suffer another health episode when he discovers his family legacy will fund inner-city housing developments and scholarships for underprivileged youth." A small smile played at Eleanor's lips. "Particularly when the foundation is named after your mother." Dominic allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Maria Russo had cleaned Howard Montgomery's offices for 20 years, enduring his condescension and occasional harassment without complaint to support her son. The irony of her name adorning his buildings would not be lost on anyone who knew their history. "Perfect," Dominic said. "In the other matter?" Eleanor passed him a sealed envelope. "The investigation into Marco Benetti has been quietly expanded to include his recent contacts. Vanessa's name is prominently featured." "Excellent." Dominic stood to leave. "I believe we're finished here." As he reached the door, Eleanor asked, "What about Raymond?" His federal case seems straightforward, but these matters have a way of evolving. "Raymond made his choice," Dominic replied without turning. "Now he lives with the consequences." That evening, Detective Martinez requested a meeting at a quiet bar near the waterfront. She arrived in civilian clothes, looking tired but satisfied. "The federal prosecutor is building quite a case," she said after ordering a scotch. "Raymond Montgomery's been singing like a canary since they showed him the evidence." "Anything surprising?" Dominic asked, nursing his own drink. "He claims Vanessa was the mastermind. Says she arranged the initial contact with Zhao through an old Harvard classmate." Martinez studied Dominic's reaction. "That fit your perception of your ex-wife?" "Vanessa always was more calculating than people gave her credit for, Dominic acknowledged. Raymond had the connections, but she had the vision. That explains her immunity deal. Martinez sipped her scotch. Limited immunity in exchange for testimony against her brother and father. Pretty cold, throwing family under the bus. The Montgomery way, Dominic said dryly. Though I'm surprised the prosecutors agreed, given her involvement. They might reconsider when they see this. Martinez slid a folder across the table. Found during the search of her personal effects. Detailed instructions for Benetti, including your daily routines, security weaknesses, and preferred payment methods for permanent removal. Dominic reviewed the documents with outward calm, though cold fury built inside him. The plans were meticulous, including contingencies for making his death appear accidental or suicide, depending on circumstances. This would void any immunity deal, he noted. Already has. The arrest warrant was issued an hour ago. Martinez reclaimed the folder. Thought you should know. I appreciate that. Dominic finished his drink. What happens now? Now Vanessa Montgomery joins her family in disgrace. Martinez stood to leave. Though between us, I'm curious what you planned for her before this evidence emerged. I know you well enough to recognize you had something in motion. Dominic smiled thinly. Nothing she didn't earn. After Martinez departed, Dominic remained at the bar, contemplating how quickly fortunes could change. 3 months ago, he'd been at the pinnacle of success with a thriving business and what he'd thought was a strategic marriage. Now he sat alone, having systematically destroyed those who betrayed him. His phone buzzed with a text from Anthony. V taken into custody at lawyer's office. Scene described as dramatic. Another message followed from Natalia. All systems purged as requested. No digital footprint remains. Dominic ordered another drink. The end game was approaching, but one piece remained in play, the most dangerous one. Marco Benetti was a survivor. 30 years in his profession had taught him to recognize when a situation had deteriorated beyond salvation. The Montgomery operation had clearly reached that point. He methodically packed his sparse apartment, preparing to disappear as he'd done many times before. New identity documents, offshore accounts, transportation arrangements, all standard procedure when clients became liabilities. The soft click of his front door latch freezing his movements. Benetti reached for the gun concealed under his packing materials, turning smoothly to face the intruder. I wouldn't, said Dominic Russo calmly from the doorway, his own weapon already aimed. Professional courtesy suggests we talk first. Russo, Benetti's weathered face betrayed no emotion. I wondered if you'd come personally. Some matters require a personal touch, like discovering your wife hired a hitman. Dominic gestured for Benetti to sit. You have a reputation for completing contracts, and for client confidentiality, Benetti responded. A principle I maintain even in compromise situations. Admirable. Unnecessary in this case, as the authorities already have Vanessa's detailed instructions for my elimination. Dominic remained standing, gun steady. What interests me is whether you intended to fulfill that contract despite recent developments. Benetti considered his response carefully. I provide services based on professional assessment. The current circumstances made the contract inadvisable to pursue. Smart decision. Dominic placed a thick envelope on the table. This contains enough to facilitate your disappearance. More than Vanessa paid, with the advantage of not being traceable to Montgomery accounts currently under federal scrutiny. Benetti made no move toward the envelope. Why would you pay me not to kill you when I've already decided against it? I'm not paying you to spare me, Dominic clarified. I'm paying you for information. Specifically, what else Vanessa asked you to arrange besides my death? Understanding dawned in Benetti's eyes. The woman is thorough. I'll give her that. Your elimination was only part of her contingency plan. Tell me the rest. She planned to reconstruct the Montgomery empire from offshore assets unknown to authorities. Had detailed knowledge of accounts even her father thought were secret. Benetti allowed himself a small smile. She also had insurance against betrayal by her brother or father. Evidence implicating them in activities beyond what the authorities currently know. Where is this evidence? Multiple locations. One set in a safe deposit box, another with her lawyer. The most damaging. Benetti hesitated. Finish your thought. Dominic prompted, gun unwavering. The most damaging evidence is in a storage facility registered to her maternal grandmother's maiden name. Unit contains documents dating back decades. Your father-in-law's entire criminal history, systematically compiled by Vanessa over years. Why would she document her own family's crimes? The woman repeatedly told me, knowledge is leverage. She was preparing for this possibility long before you realized there was a problem. Benetti nodded toward the envelope. That's worth considerably more than what you're offering. Perhaps. Dominic produced a second envelope. This contains the complete details of your arrangement with Vanessa, ready for submission to authorities. Your choice. Take my payment and disappear permanently, or test whether your professional reputation will protect you from federal prosecution for conspiracy to commit murder. Benetti's expression remained impassive, but his eyes conveyed his decision before he spoke. The storage facility is in Framingham, under the name Margaret Whitaker. Unit 227. Electronic key in Vanessa's personal effects, likely confiscated during her arrest. Dominic placed both envelopes on the table. Our business is concluded. I suggest European destinations over South American ones, given your particular skill set. As Dominic turned to leave, Benetti called after him. She underestimated you. Fatally. Everyone does, Dominic replied without looking back. It's my only reliable advantage. Chapter 7. Phoenix Principle. Rain lashed against the windows of Dominic's penthouse as he reviewed the contents of Vanessa's secret storage unit. Detective Martinez had obtained a warrant based on Benetti's information, uncovering a meticulous archive of Montgomery family secrets spanning 3 generations. She's been collecting evidence since college, Martinez marveled, spreading photos across Dominic's dining table. Bank records, correspondence, photographs, recorded conversations. It's a prosecutor's dream and the Montgomery family's worst nightmare. Vanessa always took extraordinary notes, Dominic remarked, examining a ledger detailing Howard Montgomery's property acquisitions through the 1990s. I admired her attention to detail. Never imagined she was documenting her own family's criminal activities. The question is why, Martinez said. Why document crimes you're connected to? Leverage, Dominic replied without hesitation. Vanessa was building her insurance policy against betrayal. In the Montgomery family, loyalty lasted only until it became inconvenient. Martinez gathered the materials. The federal prosecutor is reviewing everything now. This significantly strengthens the cases against Howard and Raymond. As for Vanessa, she shook her head. Her immunity deal is completely voided. The conspiracy to commit murder charges alone carry up to 20 years. After Martinez departed with the evidence, Dominic poured himself a scotch and contemplated the rain-blurred city lights. The systematic destruction of the Montgomerys was nearly complete. Howard under house arrest awaiting trial. Raymond facing decades in federal prison. Vanessa's calculated betrayal of both men backfiring spectacularly. Yet victory felt hollow. The company he'd built was intact, even stronger after removing the Montgomery influence, but the personal cost had been substantial. Trust, once broken, couldn't be repaired. His phone rang. Anthony, calling from the Harbor Point construction site. We found something you need to see, his friend said without preamble. In the sub-basement level of the main structure. Hidden room, recently sealed. Related to Zhao's operation? Maybe, but there's more. Documents, Dom. Plans dating back years, with your name specifically mentioned. This wasn't a recent operation. They've been planning this for a long time. Secure the area. I'm on my way. The rain had intensified to a near-biblical downpour by the time Dominic reached Harbor Point. Water cascaded down the partially constructed buildings, turning the site into a maze of reflective surfaces and treacherous footing. Anthony met him at the construction trailer, soaked despite his raincoat. This way, we've kept everything untouched. They descended into the bowels of the main building, using temporary stairs that shuddered under their weight. The hidden room had been concealed behind prefabricated concrete panels, discoverable only during the detailed inspection Dominic had ordered after reclaiming the project. Inside, battery-powered lights revealed a space roughly 15 feet square, its walls covered with documents, photographs, and maps. At the center stood a table containing architectural plans for Harbor Point, but with significant modifications from the approved design. "It's like a command center," Anthony observed, "or a war room." Dominic studied the wall nearest the door, where a timeline had been meticulously constructed. It began 5 years earlier, notably 2 years before he'd married Vanessa, and culminated with project completion scheduled for next month. "This wasn't opportunistic," Dominic murmured. "This was the plan from the beginning. Look at this." Anthony pointed to a collection of surveillance photos, Dominic meeting with federal officials, entering government buildings, shaking hands with law enforcement personnel. Each was labeled with dates and locations. They knew about my cooperation with the authorities, Dominic realized. They were documenting it as leverage. "There's more." Anthony indicated another section where blueprints of Dominic's properties were displayed, including his home, office, and even his father's auto shop. Each featured markings indicating security systems, daily routines, and potential vulnerabilities. "They weren't just planning to remove me from the business," Dominic said, cold realization washing over him. "They were planning to eliminate me completely if necessary." Further investigation revealed folders containing detailed profiles of everyone in Dominic's inner circle. Anthony, Natalia, Eleanor Chun, even Detective Martinez. Each profile included weaknesses to exploit, pressure points to leverage. But the most disturbing discovery came in a sealed envelope hidden inside a hollowed-out construction manual. Inside, Dominic found photographs of himself as a child, his mother, and his father, surveillance images dating back decades, long before he'd met the Montgomerys. "What the hell?" Anthony whispered, looking over Dominic's shoulder. At the bottom of the envelope lay a single document, a birth certificate, Dominic's birth certificate, but with information that contradicted everything he knew. His father was listed not as Franco Russo, but as Howard Montgomery. "This has to be fake," Anthony insisted. "A ploy to destabilize you." Dominic stared at the document, memories rearranging themselves like puzzle pieces, finding new configurations. His mother's mysterious benefactor, who had paid for his education. Howard Montgomery's unexpected approval of his marriage to Vanessa, despite his background. The old man's peculiar interest in his development strategies. "We need to verify this," Dominic said finally, carefully returning the document to its envelope. Discreetly, as they prepared to leave, a low rumbling sound penetrated the concrete around them. The building shuddered, dust raining from the ceiling. "What was that?" Anthony asked, tensing. Before Dominic could respond, a series of explosions rocked the structure. The temporary lighting flickered and died, plunging them into darkness broken only by emergency exit signs. "The supports!" Dominic shouted over the growing roar. "The building's coming down." They scrambled toward the exit, dodging falling debris as the structure groaned around them. The temporary stairs had partially collapsed, forcing them to jump the final section to reach the ground floor. Outside, chaos reigned. Despite the storm, flames leapt from strategic points around the construction site. Secondary explosions indicated carefully placed charges. This was no accident. "Perimeter breach in sectors 2 and 5, shouted one of Anthony's security team through the radio. "Armed intruders on site." Dominic and Anthony took cover behind a concrete barrier as gunfire erupted from the direction of the harbor. Through the curtain of rain, shadowy figures moved with military precision toward the main building. Zhao's people, Dominic guessed, cleaning up loose ends. "They're boxing us in," Anthony observed grimly, drawing his weapon. "We need to move before they complete the encirclement." A bullet pinged off the barrier inches from Dominic's head. He pulled out his own gun, checking the ammunition. "Like old times, Ant. Was hoping those days were behind us," Anthony replied with a grim smile. On 3, they broke cover simultaneously, moving in practice coordination honed during their hardscrabble youth. Anthony laid down, covering fire, while Dominic advanced to the next position, then reversed roles, systematically working their way toward the site entrance. The attackers pursued relentlessly, their superior numbers offset by Anthony and Dominic's intimate knowledge of the site layout. As they approached the perimeter, headlights cut through the rain, police vehicles responding to the explosions. Martinez, Dominic realized, she must have had the site under surveillance. The arrival of law enforcement scattered the attackers, who melted away into the darkness with professional efficiency. By the time Detective Martinez reached them, Dominic and Anthony stood alone in the rain, watching Harbor Point burn. What the hell happened? Martinez demanded, rain plastering her hair to her face. Zhao's organization sending a message, Dominic replied, pocketing his weapon before other officers noticed it, destroying evidence and eliminating witnesses simultaneously. Martinez surveyed the destruction. They failed at the latter, at least. For now, Dominic said soberly. But they'll try again. The Montgomerys might be neutralized, but they've unleashed something far more dangerous in their desperation. As emergency services swarmed the site, Dominic pulled Anthony and Martinez aside. I need to disappear for a while. This won't end until Zhao's organization believes I'm no longer a threat. What are you planning? Martinez asked warily. Better you don't know the details. Dominic handed her a flash drive. But this contains everything we found tonight. Keep it secure. It's insurance for all of us. Anthony clasped his friend's shoulder. Where will you go? To find answers, Dominic replied, thinking of the birth certificate concealed in his jacket. Starting with my father, both of them. Chapter 8, Blood Debts. Franco Russo's hands trembled as he examined the birth certificate, a cigarette burning forgotten between his fingers. The small apartment above his auto shop, rarely seen by outsiders, reflected a lifetime of paranoia. Reinforced doors, minimal windows, surveillance monitors covering every approach. Where did you get this? He finally asked, his gravelly voice barely audible. Harbor Point, Dominic replied. Hidden room full of surveillance materials. The Montgomerys have been watching me my entire life. Franco crushed the cigarette in an overflowing ashtray. Your mother swore she'd take this to her grave. So it's true. The confirmation hit Dominic like a physical blow, though he'd suspected since finding the document. Howard Montgomery is my biological father. Maria worked as a housekeeper for the Montgomerys when she first came from Italy, Franco said, pouring himself a generous whiskey. Howard had a reputation with the staff. When she got pregnant, he paid her to disappear to protect his marriage and reputation. And you? What do you fit in this story? Franco laughed bitterly. I loved your mother from the moment I met her. Pregnant or not, I didn't care. We married, gave you my name, raised you as my own. Did I know? Did you tell me and I've forgotten? No. Franco shook his head firmly. Maria and I agreed you would never know. Howard provided money for your education, anonymously. We told you it was scholarships. Dominic paced the small room, memories recalibrating with this new information. That's why you were so angry when I married Vanessa. You knew I was marrying my half-sister. Franco's expression confirmed it before his words did. I tried to stop it without revealing the truth. When I couldn't, he shrugged helplessly. I withdrew. Couldn't bear to watch. Jesus Christ. Dominic braced himself against the wall, nausea washing over him. Vanessa is my sister. We're blood. Half-sister, Franco corrected, as if that distinction mattered. Howard's daughter from his marriage. Does she know? I don't know. Howard might have told her, might not have. That family keeps secrets like others breathe air. Dominic's phone buzzed. A text from Natalia. Confirmed 3 teams searching for you. 1 at your penthouse, 1 in office, 1 circling your father's neighborhood. Move quickly. I need to go, Dominic said, showing Franco the message. They're closing in. Franco moved to a painting on the wall, swinging it aside to reveal a small safe. He retrieved a thick envelope and a set of keys. Emergency fund. Untraceable. And a property upstate nobody knows about. Not even your mother knew I had it. Come with me, Dominic urged. They'll check here eventually. Franco shook his head. My running days are over, son. Besides, I need to handle some things here, make some calls. People who owe me favors might help slow down whoever's hunting you. As Dominic prepared to leave, Franco embraced him fiercely. You are my son, he said, voice rough with emotion. Biology be damned. Never forget that. The cabin Franco had directed him to sat 20 miles from the nearest town, accessible only by a dirt road that became treacherous in bad weather. Simple, but solid, it offered the isolation Dominic needed to process revelations that had shattered his understanding of his own life. He'd been there 3 days when Natalia arrived, having taken elaborate precautions to ensure she wasn't followed. Your father's been arrested, she said without preamble, dropping her bag by the door. Federal agents took him in for questioning about his connections to the Zheng crime family. The Zheng family? What the hell does my father have to do with Chinese organized crime? Nothing directly, Natalia explained. But Zhao isn't just a businessman or government agent. He's connected to the Zheng family through marriage. When the Harbor Point deal collapsed, he apparently reached out to those connections for assistance. And they connected Zhao to my father, based on his past. More than that, they found detailed dossiers on you and Franco in Raymond Montgomery's possession. He'd been feeding information to Zhao for months, including your father's history and potential leverage points. Dominic absorbed this with cold fury. How long will they hold him? Hard to say, but there's more. Natalia hesitated. Howard Montgomery suffered a major stroke yesterday. He's in intensive care, not expected to recover. The news should have brought satisfaction, yet Dominic felt only a hollow emptiness. The man was his biological father, the architect of decades of manipulation, yet still a stranger. And Vanessa? Still in custody, but pushing hard for a deal. She's offering information on Zhao's organization in exchange for leniency. Natalia studied him carefully. There are rumors she's claiming coercion, saying Raymond forced her participation through threats and manipulation. And people believe that. Some do. She's very convincing. Natalia's expression softened slightly. Dom, there's something else you should know. Medical records were among the files we recovered from Harbor Point, including genetic profiles of the Montgomery family. Let me guess. Confirmation that Howard is my biological father? Yes, but also... Natalia hesitated. Vanessa isn't Howard's biological daughter. She was born during a period when her mother had separated from Howard. Different father entirely. The revelation struck Dominic like a thunderbolt. We're not related by blood. No, but Raymond is your half-brother. And based on the records, he's known about your parentage for years. Possibly used it to manipulate Howard into accepting your marriage to Vanessa. Dominic laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. So I've been destroying my own family. They betrayed you first, Natalia reminded him. And they knew the truth while you didn't. Before Dominic could respond, his secure phone rang. Anthony, using their emergency protocol. They've taken Eleanor Chun, Anthony reported tersely. 3 men, professional extraction team. Her secretary was injured trying to intervene. Zhao's people, most likely. They left a message for you. Anthony's voice tightened. They want the evidence from Harbor Point in exchange for her safe return. All copies, plus your personal testimony that Zhao wasn't involved. When and where? Tomorrow night. Old fish processing plant at the South Harbor. They specified you come alone. After ending the call, Dominic turned to Natalia. I need to return to Boston. It's a trap, she said flatly. Of course it is. But Eleanor is involved because of me. I won't abandon her. What's your plan? Dominic moved to the cabin's small table where he'd spread maps and documents. First, we free my father. Then we end this, permanently. Detective Martinez looked exhausted when she met Dominic at an abandoned warehouse near the city limits. Her normal professional polish had given way to rumpled clothing and shadows under her eyes. This meeting never happened, she said by way of greeting. I'm risking my badge, even being here. I appreciate it, Dominic replied. What can you tell me about my father's situation? Franco Russo is being held as a material witness in an ongoing federal investigation into organized crime connections to the Harbor Point development. Martinez consulted her notebook. They're using his history as leverage, threatening to reopen several cases from the 90s where the statute of limitations hasn't expired. Is he talking? Not a word. Your father's old school. Martinez regarded Dominic carefully. The feds believe he knows where you are. They're applying pressure. I need him released. Martinez laughed incredulously. Just like that? I'm a detective, not a magician. What if you had evidence implicating the actual perpetrators? Enough to shift focus entirely from my father. That would help, but... And what if that evidence also helped you close several high-profile cold cases, including 2 homicides from the warehouse fire Howard Montgomery arranged? Interest sparked in Martinez's tired eyes. What exactly do you have? Dominic slid a flash drive across the table. Everything. The complete Montgomery criminal history, Zhao's operation details, financial records documenting decades of corruption. Enough to build careers for ambitious prosecutors. And in exchange, my father's immediate release. And operational support for tonight. Martinez pocketed the drive. What happens tonight? Justice, Dominic said simply. But I'll need tactical backup that doesn't officially exist. Can you arrange that? After a long moment, Martinez nodded. For this evidence? I can make certain arrangements off the books. But Dominic, this ends tonight. One way or another. That's the plan, he agreed. One way or another. The South Harbor fish processing plant had been abandoned for years, its cavernous interior permeated with the lingering smell of its former purpose despite long disuse. Dominic approached alone as instructed, the weight of his concealed weapon a cold comfort against his side. Inside, harsh industrial lights illuminated a clearing amid rusting equipment. Eleanor Chun sat bound to a chair, bruised but conscious. Behind her stood Wei Zhao, flanked by 4 armed men. Mr. Russo, Zhao greeted coolly, punctual despite your circumstances. I admire that. Let her go, Dominic replied. She has nothing to do with this. On the contrary, Ms. Chen has been most helpful in explaining certain legal intricacies of your business operations. Zhao stepped forward. Do you have what I requested? Dominic held up a leather portfolio. All evidence recovered from Harbor Point, including the original documents. No copies exist. A transparent lie, Zhao remarked, but acceptable for now. Slide it across the floor. Dominic complied, watching as one of Zhao's men retrieved the portfolio and handed it to his employer. Zhao examined the contents with clinical detachment. Impressive collection, he commented. Raymond Montgomery was more thorough than I gave him credit for. Raymond was a tool, Dominic said. Just like you were. Zhao looked up sharply. Explain yourself. Harbor Point was never about luxury condominiums or even an intelligence outpost. It was about creating a secure transit point for your organization's real business. Dominic gestured to their surroundings. Much like this facility was in its prime, the perfect cover for moving certain valuable commodities through busy ports. You seem well informed for someone who was blindsided by his own family. I adapt quickly, Dominic replied, and I recognize when I'm not seeing the full picture. The Montgomerys didn't approach you. Your organization approached them, probably years ago, looking for influential partners with flexible ethics. Zhao's slight smile confirmed the assessment. And now I'm offering a better partnership. Dominic met the other man's gaze steadily. The Montgomerys are finished. I control their assets, their connections, their influence, without their liabilities. An interesting proposal. Unfortunately, you've become a significant liability yourself. Zhao nodded to his men, who raised their weapons. Your elimination simplifies matters considerably. Before you make that decision, Dominic said calmly, you should know that federal tactical teams are currently surrounding this building. On my signal, or if anything happens to me, they move in. You're bluffing. Martinez, Dominic called out. Red laser sights immediately appeared on Zhao and his men, emanating from shadowed positions around the facility. Detective Martinez emerged from the darkness, accompanied by heavily armed officers in tactical gear. Federal agents. Drop your weapons. Zhao's men hesitated, looking to their employer for direction. With remarkable composure, Zhao slowly raised his hands. It seems negotiations have shifted, he observed. Though, I wonder what your law enforcement friends would think of your proposal to continue our arrangement. They heard exactly what I wanted them to hear, Dominic replied as Martinez's team secured the gunman. A confession to your criminal enterprise, recorded for posterity. As officers led Zhao away, Dominic moved to Eleanor, quickly freeing her restraints. Are you all right? I've been better, she said shakily. Reminded me why I prefer corporate law to criminal defense. Martinez approached as medics examined Eleanor. Your father was released 20 minutes ago. Anthony's bringing him to your penthouse, as we discussed. And Zhao, going away for a very long time, along with what remains of his network. Between the evidence you provided and his statements tonight, multiple agencies have what they need. Martinez studied him intently. You took an enormous risk. Calculated, Dominic corrected. Like everything else. What now? Back to property development as if none of this happened. Dominic gazed around the abandoned processing plant, seeing not decay, but potential. Actually, I'm considering a new project. This facility has interesting possibilities. Martinez laughed incredulously. Of course you are. Some people never change. But as Dominic surveyed the space that had nearly become his execution site, he knew that wasn't true. He had changed irrevocably. The question was whether that change would define his future or merely inform it. As emergency vehicles departed with Zhao and his men, Dominic stood alone in the cavernous space, feeling the weight of choices made and unmade. The Montgomerys were destroyed, their legacy dismantled. Zhao's organization was crippled. His enemies had been systematically eliminated. Victory should have felt sweeter. Instead, it tasted of ashes and lost possibilities, of family connections distorted by secrets and lies, of trust betrayed and innocence long abandoned. His phone rang. Anthony, calling from the penthouse. Your father's settled in. There's someone else here you might want to talk to. Who? Vanessa. She was released an hour ago on her lawyer's arrangement. Showed up here asking for you. Dominic's grip tightened on the phone. What does she want? Says she has information you need. About Howard's condition and Raymond's final play. Anthony's voice lowered. She looks rough, Dom. Whatever happened in custody wasn't gentle. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't let her leave. As Dominic walked toward the exit, he noted the building's excellent harbor access, its concealed loading bays, its potential for transformation. Perhaps redemption wasn't possible, but reconstruction always was. It was the principle upon which he'd built his empire, and the principle that would guide whatever came next. Chapter 9, Reclamation. Dominic's penthouse felt like a stranger's home after his absence. The sleek furnishings and carefully selected art pieces spoke of a life constructed rather than lived, a showcase for success rather than comfort. He found Vanessa on the terrace, staring out at the city lights. Her usual polished appearance had given way to something harder, more essential. The designer clothes replaced by simple jeans and sweater, her face bare of makeup, revealing shadows and strain. You look terrible, Dominic said from the doorway. She turned, a ghost of her familiar sardonic smile crossing her face. Prison will do that. Even temporary imprisonment. You got out. That's more than Raymond can say. Raymond made his choices. Vanessa's voice carried new edges, honed by betrayal and consequences. As did I. Dominic remained in the doorway, maintaining distance. Anthony said you have information. Howard's dying, she said bluntly. The stroke damaged too much brain tissue. Doctors give him days, maybe a week. And you're here because despite everything, he's my father. Or I thought he was. Her eyes fixed on Dominic with new intensity. But he's your father too, isn't he? Your biological father. You knew. Not until recently. Raymond told me after his arrest, thinking it would somehow help his case if I claimed we were victims of Howard's manipulation. Vanessa laughed bitterly. Imagine learning the man you married is your half-brother. Though apparently I'm not a Montgomery by blood, so we're not actually related. Small comfort, Dominic observed coldly. Isn't it? Vanessa challenged. Howard's dying with his legacy in ruins. Raymond faces decades in prison. I've lost everything except what my lawyers managed to hide from asset seizure. You've won completely, Dominic. Destroyed us all with your signature precision. You try to have me killed, Vanessa. After you systematically dismantled everything we built, she flared, genuine emotion cracking her composure. What happened to the man I married? The visionary who saw possibilities where others saw only obstacles. He discovered his wife and business partner were conspiring against him. Dominic replied evenly, using his business as cover for criminal operations, planning his elimination if he became problematic. It wasn't supposed to go that far, Vanessa insisted. The Harbor Point arrangements with Zhao were Raymond's initiative. I only learned the full extent of his plans after you were already investigating. And Benetti? The detailed instructions for my elimination? Was that Raymond's initiative too? Vanessa had the grace to look away. Insurance. A contingency I never intended to activate. Until you did. Silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of betrayals too significant for forgiveness, too personal for detachment. Why are you really here, Vanessa? Dominic finally asked. It's not a check on my well-being or share news about Howard. She reached into her bag, removing a small flash drive. Raymond made arrangements before his arrest. Dead man switch protocols designed to release information if certain conditions weren't met. What kind of information? Everything. The complete Montgomery archives, including materials Howard collected over decades. Business dealings, political connections, blackmail evidence on half of Boston's elite. Vanessa placed the drive on the patio table, including evidence of certain federal officials' involvement in operations they publicly prosecuted. Why give this to me? Because the switch activates in 48 hours unless deactivated by Raymond, who's currently in solitary confinement with no communications access. When it triggers, the information releases automatically to media outlets, law enforcement agencies, and select business competitors. And you want me to? Stop it. Vanessa's calm cracked slightly. This information would destroy what remains of the Montgomery name, but would also implicate dozens of innocent people. Families who don't deserve to be ruined because of Howard and Raymond's actions. Dominic studied her with clinical detachment. Since when do you care about collateral damage? Since I lost everything and realized I still have to live with myself. She gestured to the flash drive. The deactivation codes are there, along with server locations and access credentials. Raymond designed it to be unhackable, but he left this backdoor for family emergencies. And what do you get out of this? Vanessa laughed, a genuine sound that momentarily revealed the woman he'd once believed he knew. Nothing you'd be willing to give. My reputation is destroyed, my assets mostly seized, my family legacy in ruins. She met his gaze directly. Consider it my acknowledgement that you won. Dominic picked up the flash drive, turning it thoughtfully in his fingers. You realize I'll verify everything before taking action. I'd expect nothing less. Vanessa moved toward the door, pausing beside him. For what it's worth, I did love you once. Before family obligations and ambition corrupted everything. It's worth very little, Dominic replied coldly. But noted, after she left, Dominic examined the flash drive, considering its potential as either salvation or trap. Within minutes, he'd contacted Natalia, arranging for comprehensive analysis before any action. His father, Franco, the only father who mattered, entered the terrace, moving slower than usual after his brief incarceration. She's gone, Franco asked, settling heavily into a chair. Yes. You believe her about this dead man's switch? Dominic shrugged. Raymond was always paranoid. It's consistent with his methods. We'll verify before acting. Franco studied his son's profile against the city lights. What happens after this? When all the Montgomerys are either dead or imprisoned? Life continues, Dominic replied. Business expands. Harbor Point gets rebuilt according to the original vision. And personally, you just go back to being alone in this glass fortress. The question struck deeper than Dominic expected. What's the alternative? Trust is a luxury I can no longer afford. There's a difference between caution and isolation, Franco observed. Your mother understood that. Even after everything Howard did, she still believed in connections. In family. The family she built with you, Dominic acknowledged. not the one that betrayed me. The point stands. Revenge satisfies, but it doesn't sustain. Franco gestured to the penthouse around them. All this means nothing if you're just accumulating wealth and power to prove Howard Montgomery wrong about the janitor's son. The observation hit uncomfortably close to truth. Much of Dominic's drive had always been proving himself against Howard's initial dismissal, against the social barriers his background created. Now, knowing Howard was his biological father added layers of complexity to motivations he'd thought he understood. "I need to finish this first," Dominic said finally. "Ensure the dead man's switch is neutralized, the remaining threats contained. Then we'll see." 3 days later, Dominic stood in an opulent hospital room, watching Howard Montgomery's labored breathing. The machines surrounding the bed maintained vital functions the old man's failing body could no longer manage independently. "He won't regain consciousness," said the doctor who'd escorted Dominic in. "The brain damage is too extensive. It's simply a matter of time." After the doctor departed, Dominic sat beside the bed, studying the face of his biological father. They shared few physical traits, perhaps the set of the jaw, the shape of the hands. Nature had kept their connection subtle, as if acknowledging it was a secret best left undiscovered. "I disabled Raymond's failsafe," Dominic said to the unconscious man. "Not for your sake, but for the innocent people who would have been destroyed alongside your legacy. It's something my real father taught me. Franco, the man who raised me. Collateral damage should be minimized whenever possible." Howard's monitors beeped steadily, the only response to Dominic's words. "I've spent my life proving myself worthy of a world that judged me for my background. Proving myself to you, though I didn't know it. How much of my drive came from your blood? How much from my mother's determination? From Franco's example?" Dominic leaned closer, his voice hardening. "You had a chance to acknowledge me, to be honest from the beginning. Instead, you manipulated from the shadows, using me as another chess piece in your grand design. That was your failure, not mine." Rising to leave, Dominic placed a small envelope on the bedside table. "Inside is a legal document transferring your remaining personal assets to a foundation in my mother's name. Maria Russo will posthumously fund scholarships for the children of domestic workers, the invisible people who maintained your world while you pretended they didn't exist." At the door, Dominic paused for a final look at the man whose blood he carried. "Goodbye, Howard. I'd say rest in peace, but I'm not feeling that generous." The reconstruction of Harbor Point proceeded under Dominic's direct supervision, transforming the site from the ashes of betrayal into a testament to his original vision. The hidden facilities and compromised design elements were eliminated, replaced with the community-focused development he'd initially proposed. On the day construction officially resumed, Dominic stood overlooking the site with Eleanor Chun, now fully recovered from her ordeal. "The investors are remarkably enthusiastic," she noted, reviewing reports on her tablet. "The Montgomery scandal has apparently created opportunities rather than liabilities. People appreciate a redemption story," Dominic observed. "Rising from ashes plays well in Boston." Speaking of rising, Eleanor said, "I've been meaning to ask about your plans for the old fish processing plant. My sources tell me you purchased it through a shell company last week." Dominic smiled slightly. "It has potential. Good harbor access, solid infrastructure despite its age, and significant history given recent events." Eleanor regarded him shrewdly. "Some might consider it morbid to develop a site where you were nearly executed. I prefer to see it as reclamation, transforming trauma into opportunity." "Philosophical," Eleanor remarked. "And the Russo Family Foundation? Another transformation." The foundation, established with assets recovered from the Montgomerys, had quickly become a significant force in Boston philanthropy, focusing on education and housing for underprivileged communities. "My mother would have approved," Dominic said simply. "She believed in lifting others as you rise." Their conversation was interrupted by Anthony's arrival with time-sensitive security matters, leaving Dominic alone on the observation platform. From this height, the harbor stretched before him, the same view that had captivated him when he'd first developed his vision for this property. His phone buzzed with a text from Franco. Dinner tonight. No excuses. Family matters to discuss. Family. The word carried new weight after everything that had transpired. The Montgomerys had shown him what family shouldn't be. A web of manipulation, secrets, and conditional loyalty. Franco had shown him the alternative. Steadfast support despite blood differences. Honesty even when painful. Raymond remained in federal custody, facing decades of imprisonment for his role in Zhao's operation. Vanessa had disappeared after their final conversation, reportedly traveling in Europe on funds her lawyers had protected from seizure. Howard Montgomery had died without regaining consciousness, his funeral sparsely attended and quickly forgotten. The Montgomery dynasty had fallen, but from its ruins, Dominic had salvaged something unexpected, clarity about what truly mattered. Not empire building or revenge, but creation. Not accumulation, but purpose. As he surveyed what would become his greatest achievement, Dominic felt something he hadn't experienced since before the betrayal. Anticipation. The future stretched before him, unwritten and full of possibility. The price of betrayal had been paid in full, by those who deserved it, and by himself. Now came the harder part, building something worthy of survival. He texted Franco back, "I'll be there. Save me some lasagna." Some foundations, Dominic had learned, were worth preserving. The rest could be rebuilt, stronger than before. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.